like your explanation about staying 7 days in a row before you advance, because then the rest, it doesn't seem as scary.
Welcome back to American Traddiction, a journey of breaking carb addiction. Last week, Michelle saw the face of food addiction. She realized that addiction to food is real and it's insidious in our culture. Admitting there was a problem marked her first steps toward recovery. Today, we show the roadmap called keto-Continuum.
You know, the idea of being addicted to a lot of the foods that I grew up on, I found to be very overwhelming. Seeing the big picture mapped out through the keto-Continuum, though, was very helpful for me, because in the past, I had blocked my ability to advance to higher levels of keto. They seemed impossible until I saw the tiny, methodical steps plotted out.
Yes, watch until the end and see where Michelle lives on the keto-Continuum and where she wants to advance to.
Well, I think that's big, breaking the cycle. That's what you're doing.
That was that moment that I said, that's what addiction looks like.
To be able to just to say, okay, it's in his diet, and we may not even need to visit for medicine, that was huge.
We're on day 10 of your keto journey. And as I look at all the steps that you've gone through, you've done your why, we've cleaned out the cupboards, you've definitely had some immersion of, okay, what do you mean there's no snacking at this hour? You've had to confront your son with a few moments of like, just hold the course, stay the course. You're the leader, he can't do it if you don't do it. That process brings you to a place where I now try to introduce this keto-Continuum. Changing behavior, people like to look at the roadmap and say, where are we going? But before I let people do that, I want them saying, why are you on the journey? What are some of your personal goals? Like, what do you want out of this? And then I know that the first few steps in this keto-Continuum, you don't have to really do anything except follow that rule of 20 carbs or less. If you reach for 0, you'll stay under 20. If you look at those first 3 steps in this keto-Continuum, I'm going to show you that it's really important that they don't even look. You just have to focus on 20. Just don't look, be peeing on a ketone strip and 20, that's it. And then I try to say, all right, now that you have a good understanding of why, you've got your first couple of steps in the right direction, that's where people are like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, that's okay. I'll show you what you're doing. What I think introducing the roadmap does is it gives you a sense that you don't have to know all of the journey or where you're going, but you're going to focus on at least the next step. So I always tell people that I have number 1 as the place on there. It says eat every 2 to 4 hours. And the guidelines, I tell people, they're fueled on glucose. They've never fueled on ketones. And what I'm really trying to show you is that if you fall, you have a place to land on the keto-Continuum that you got all the way back to 1. And there's been many times that people fall off the wagon, and if they can't even find themselves on the map, they kind of get discouraged. So I say that's where most people begin. The first real step in the ketogenic journey was to go to less than 20 carbs per day. They just do things. They don't even know they're doing them, but they suddenly find themselves, instead of eating every 2 to 4 hours, they're eating every 6 to 8.
Absolutely.
So is that what you feel?
Yeah, except for yesterday, and I actually just had 1 meal yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that can be a great sign that your fat-based hormones are really flowing. It can be a sign that you're putting up boundaries because you want a good outcome. And we're going to go through sorting which one of those you might be doing.
Okay.
Because I really find the trap is when I have the chronic dieter who joins the ketogenic journey, they are so quick to give up the fat. They are so quick to get to 1 meal a day. And then they crash because the hormones they're not steady enough. It takes about 6 weeks to make a hormone. If you've got some brewing, you might get there in 4 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks. But if they reach for it too quick, they don't have enough in the fat supply to deliver that. And I'll explain that in a minute. So the other thing I like to point out is the chemistry carries you. This is that section that I think most people never launch past. And so that's why I pointed out. If you look, it is also the time where you should be in urine ketones. That urine ketone, it's kind of fun and exciting to do your first finger prick and you look at your numbers and then you do this calculation like, I want to know my Dr. Boz ratio. I'm like, you're not ready for that. Just stay away from that. And I put the timeline on here as about 4 to 6 weeks that they are in this white section. If I look at what's happening in the less than 20 carbs per day, the fat supplies the resources needed to make fat-built hormones. Fat-based hormones approach healthy levels during this section. Appetite decreases according to the body's chemistry. So that's kind of the science that's going on inside the body. Sometimes it takes 10 weeks before this moment happens. I tell them, don't look at the scale, listen for the absence of hunger. So if you look at that, it sometimes takes 10 weeks, that's actually on step number 3, which is I accidentally missed a meal. And so yesterday you had only one meal, but I kind of noticed over the previous days to that you were eating about 2 meals a day. And so do you think you did it on purpose, or do you think you really didn't have hunger?
I really just don't think I had hunger, because I had more of what I would call a brunch. So I didn't really have breakfast. I woke up, I wasn't hungry.
Okay.
Waited till probably about 12:30, 1 o'clock.
Okay.
And then I had 4 really good breakfast fat bombs. So
Good.
they had a lot of fat, and then I had sausage
Okay.
with a mayonnaise-based sauce with that. So I
Perfect.
had like a lot of fat that carried me throughout my day. And
It's powerful.
yeah.
It really is powerful. Where you say, okay, if they can get that meal during sunlight, life goes so much better. And if they can make sure that there's enough fat to carry them. When the fat-based hormones are in healthy supply, they do great. Your fat-based hormones are in your fat cells. They are fat-based. They're attracted to fat. So if you do a fat biopsy, you can find actually some testosterone, some estrogen, but they're stuck. They're in the fat cell. And when you eat fat, you can turn some of those into the hormones. But if they stay at that level of insulin and eating fat, they're not going to lose any more weight. They're not going to make any more fat-based hormones. They have to step over a threshold. So I get them to accidentally miss a meal, and then I tell them, this, if you'll notice, this next box on number 4 has a red outline. And the red outline says, you have to make a decision. You do the work. Discipline needed for each of these steps. Okay, and that's where I find when people write into the channel and say, I haven't lost any weight in a year. And I'm like, I can tell you right where you're at. Then they'll do things, and as they do them, you're like, okay, the problem that you're doing is you stepped over into a zone of chemistry and you wanted results without fat-based hormones on your side. And that is this danger zone, because I'm going to make them go back and go to the first steps, and they're like, and they get all anxious, like they're eating too much fat, there's no way they're going to lose weight. I'm like, you're right, you're not going to lose weight. We got to start over and make some hormones as we do this. And that's the worry that I have when somebody says, in the first 2 weeks, I'm at 1 meal a day.
Yeah.
So be really careful to not go fast in the name of your hormones. And so the step over the threshold is to get to 2 meals a day and then succeed. So if you look over here, this column is the guidelines. So this is what you think of. You got to choose. There is no magic moment. You got to say, all right, I get 2 pockets of time that I eat. So then the next one is in this column. It says, what's the step that you're working on? And this step is, I need you to succeed 7 days in a row before you advance. So people say, can I go to 16-8? Can I go to 16-8? Can I go to 1 meal a day? I'm like, that you have 7 consecutive days where you got 2 meals a day. Unfortunately, you got a big holiday up here in your next 7 days. So if you're still at 2 meals per day after all the holidays, don't be discouraged. This is not uncommon that the 7 days in a row is not an accident. I really want this a pattern that you're safe with. I love it when people don't fall any further than step 4. I just know that their chemistry was preserved if they were able to eat in 2 pockets. By stopping at the level 4, 2 meals a day, what I'm hoping you end up with is that you have a pattern that felt safe, and you're about to go through a couple, some temptations. You got family coming into town.
Absolutely.
You've got a house that's clean as far as carbs go, and you're going to get to practice saying, you're doing this for me. If you need food that's not on this menu, go find it yourself. Get out of the house to do it. Don't bring it in the house. And that's going to be a new message coming out of your mouth to your family.
Yes, it is.
Right?
Yeah.
The next thing, though, is if you look at the threshold into 16-8, the colors change to blue. And this is what I like to point out. People live here. And I think that helps people say, okay, I can do this. And that step up is that we put time-restricted eating into your life. I've got it set up into 2 sections, like 16 hours without food, and then you have the 8 hours where you eat. And then the other one in the latter part of it is 23 hours without food and 1 hour where you eat. It is a striking difference in these 2. I could have had like 15 steps of time-restricted eating. What I try to do is put both extremes of where you start, what's a minimum needed to succeed, what's the most advanced that I would want anybody to go to for a lifetime of patterned eating. And then somewhere in the middle is where people end up. You heard people talking about that today. I close my window at 2 hours. I close my window at 4 hours. And so what they're doing is they're finding what their chemistry allows. But let's go through them. I call them baseline metabolisms because it is your base. This is where you're going to be. I hope if you fall, we fall just outside the baseline and we can get you back to 16.8 pretty quick. The first one, 16.8, has some rules. Eat all food, snacks, and supplements in an 8-hour window. No eating, snacking, or chewing for 16 hours. This means no gum in the fasting hours. So suck on salt if you need a substitute. Keep your coffee filled with fat, meaning your morning drink, I'm not counting right now. The masticating or the chewing has an enzymatic response in your body. It's subtle, but when they are insulin resistant, that high level of stimulus that comes from chewing, it stops their progress. So when I say, all right, you can chew gum for 8 hours, but it's outside of those 8 hours that you stop. Once you do have 16.8 down, the rate at which you advance through these baselines is, again, I like you comfortable for at least 7 consecutive days. So if you get to 16.8 and you say, I've done this before, I'm doing okay, great, just don't be in a rush to get all the way through it. Just based on what your pattern is, I see you being within the 8 hours already is where I'm seeing, like, okay. So then what happens next is the advanced 16.8. So advanced 16.8 is all about your drink. Okay, it's that morning coffee that is filled with fat, and they're known as keto coffees now. And you're like MCT and butter and cream, and they taste amazing.
They do.
Yeah. So when people say, I hear calories don't matter on the keto diet. And I'm like, well, the chemistry has to be addressed first. And if you try to cut calories when the chemistry isn't improved or strongly improved from the beginning, you're going to suffer. You're going to turn down metabolism, your brain's going to shut off. It's not fun to be calorie restricted in a low carbohydrate, low fat-based hormone setting. So chemistry outweighs calories. But then calories do matter after that. They're not quite as equal as calories in, calories out. There's more to this. And I always remind people, you know those ketones you've been measuring? You're peeing out calories there. You're peeing out calories there. Those are units of energy that are being wasted. So once you make ketones, you got 2 options for a ketone. You're either going to burn it or you're going to pee it out. And where the ketone strips become difficult to use is when they kind of flatline. So they're making about as many ketones as they're peeing out. So the strip's kind of a light pink, but you check a number and they're in ketosis. That's where the next phase comes from. We are going to stress your metabolism at Keto Continuum number 6 by putting the advanced 16.8 into practice. And that means either surrender the coffee in the morning that has the fat in it, or you start the timer with the coffee. And that's where your 8 hours begins. What I fear introducing all this too quickly is that you start implementing the no fat in the coffee too quickly. So don't do that. Enjoy it, appreciate it, know that this is the right phase for the one you're in, but know that someday it's going to be less than that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we kind of addressed that the other day when I was talking about looking at the chart. And then after all was said and done, I got to thinking, oh, wait a minute, maybe that's called failing upward, because instead of going to a food, because I was having a moment of that craving versus hunger, and so I did have a really good creamy cup of coffee.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I'm like, I don't know if
So it is exactly what I want, because your body cannot use the stored fat right now until we get the insulin lower. And you're like, well, how low? Can't we just measure it? I'm like, well, it's relative to yesterday. It's relative to last week. So it's one of those hormones that insulin resistance is such a tricky thing to diagnose, because what is the high insulin level for you might be normal for a different person. Baseline number 7 and 8 both are. So I was tempted to only put OMAD on there, but OMAD has been blown up. OMAD stands for 1 meal a day. And what I learned when I was interviewing patients is they would say, I'm OMAD, I'm OMAD, I'm OMAD. And I'm like, I want to see your food diary. Because they would have one pocket where they would eat a meal, And then they're snacking over here, and they're snacking over here, and they're chewing gum all day long. And I'm like, you turkey, you're turning on all your enzymatic enzymes, and then you have this big fatty meal a day. No wonder you're stuck. The big fatty meal a day is very important. I tried to do all calories in 1 hour, but it's kind of like aciocha. Like, I don't think that's a real word. So I shortened it to 23 in 1. 23 hours where salt, black coffee, tea are allowed, water, and 1 hour is where the calories go in. And so that's hard. Okay, that's hard. So we'll get all this as life goes forward. But the 36-hour fast is number 9. Have you ever done one of those?
Yep.
Yeah, how'd it go?
It went.
Yeah.
And I was glad it was over.
Right? When people do it for the first time, it's powerful. You're like, now I'm done. I've arrived. Check that off my bucket list. Never do it again.
That's right.
That's right. So when you did it, what hour did you start?
Oh, in the morning.
You didn't. You started in the morning, huh? Okay. So then you made it till like supper the next night. Okay. So for the record, that's the hardest way to do it.
Oh, well, that's why it was so awful.
Right. Okay. So I tell people, fast for 36 hours. No calories, sweeteners. Start in the evening as to use 2 cycles of sleep. So 8 plus 8 is 16 hours of sleeping. Way better.
Yeah.
Okay. Begin fast after the danger. If the blood pressure meds or blood sugars are lower, you should ask your doctor. Because if you want to see the fastest way to get you off those blood pressure medicines, it's through that 36-hour fast. Man, do we clean things up. But you need fat-based hormones to do it, or you're going to feel awful. Did you feel awful when you were doing it?
Yes.
Yeah. So most people, especially if their salt isn't flowing, and I mean that by they're taking in salt, they're peeing out salt. That's what's supposed to happen in the human body. When we stop salt, it's just a game that you're playing to lower blood pressure, except it doesn't play forward very well. Okay, you get stuck, and then you need more meds, and you need more meds. So by getting salt to flow, now I've got fat-based hormones on your side, I've got salt flowing, and it will not be as painful the second time, guaranteed.
Okay.
The last 2 that are on here are the 48-hour fast and a 72-hour fast. And they are much easier to talk about when you get longer in the journey. But let me just point out the pattern of how I like you to use stressing metabolisms with baseline metabolisms. So baseline metabolisms are where you live. And you're going to find what works for you as you get there. You'll find it after a screw up usually. Like, why did I fail? Oh, I really pushed a little too hard there. So that's baseline metabolism. This is normal training for your mitochondria. But what stressing metabolism turns into are the sprints for your mitochondria. So I live somewhere around the 16/8, probably a 24. And most weeks I'll try to fast at least 36 hours because I'm trying to stress my metabolism and trying to give my mitochondria a workout on top of my baseline. So now that I've kind of gone through this, tell me what you think of this.
I like your explanation about staying 7 days in a row before you advance, because then the rest, it doesn't seem as scary because you're going just from one step to the next. You're not jumping from 16/8 down to a 72-hour fast.
Amen.
Yeah, because I tried that once. That was awful. Been there, done that. No, thank you. And that number still scares me.
Oh, yeah.
I think maybe because of that experience, or maybe the number, or both. I don't know.
It's real. Like it's a moment. Like I know you haven't gotten all the way through the course, but there's the final video in the course explains why 72-hour fast is so important. And I'll save it for you because it is so powerful. It's enlightening to say, oh, that's why we do that. And it will change the paradigm of don't start out there as an insulin-resistant person going to 72 hours. You'll hurt yourself, and you'll never want to do it again.
The people around you will not like you.
No, you can get divorced in 72 hours. Haven't you learned? But in the end, the amount of hormonal surge that a ketogenic chemistry can provide in that time, it's mind-blowing. In your past experiences, where did you usually live?
Usually either between the 2 meals a day or being more noticing more of when I was eating and more of the 16/8.
Okay.
So you're right, though, for us habitual dieters, that you do want to get to the next step. Okay, what's next? I can do this.
Right.
And you'd have a tendency to rush it. So yeah.
I mean, the fact that you're 10 days in and you still feel good, that you did have one meal a day yesterday and you felt good. I mean, it was tapped off with a float, which we know is going to really surge your salt. So even if they weren't salting well on their own, they weren't swallowing salt, that plunge of magnesium it saves people. But yeah, salt and magnesium floats were not anywhere in the last cycle of keto for you, right?
No, not at all.
What about the bottom part that says, this one says 4 to 6 weeks, this one says live here, this one says use intermittently, and it also says that you're going to need a support system for that.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That and the psychology part, absolutely.
It's
'Cause it gets in
psychological.
yeah, it is.
It is. There's a psych lesson going on in every turn of those stressed metabolisms. Well, there's no need to go there anytime soon. We're definitely just stepping through the next layers. So if you look at the next week, from 4 to 7, where would you see you're at?
Definitely 5.
Yeah?
Yeah.
16/8 you can do.
Yeah.
So both of the meals go in there. Keep that fat in your coffee. Do not undo that.
Okay.
The reward is important. I think that's a perfect goal. I think you're being very honest, and I think we'll check in at the end of the week and see how you did.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
I get questions all the time from people asking how to advance in their keto journey. I hope this roadmap helped you to the next keto level. Find all the instructions written out in the book I wrote, Keto Continuum, or short videos found in the online course, Consistently Keto.
Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you learned something, and tune in next week to see where we revisit the deeper meaning behind the story.